Hello everybody. In this video I'm going to talk to you about using CodePen. If you've never used it before, you might find this video helpful of kind of some of the basics to getting started. If you are familiar with it, I assume you're not going to need this video, but I do want to include it for those who have not used it. So CodePen is a front-end development sandbox that allows you to put code in and see changes in real time. So it's very helpful, especially when you're getting started learning the CSS and HTML. It even handles JavaScript, but by allowing you just to plug in the code, it's kind of a quick way to test, and also it's a resource for seeing other examples. So if you've never logged in before, the first thing that you're going to have to do is to sign up for an account. So if you hit that, it's going to walk you through this process. Keep in mind there are some premium versions, but we are just going to use the free version, and it allows you to have up to one project, but really what we're going to use it for at this stage in the game is for pins. And a pin is basically a web page. It's a mock-up of a web page where you can plug in HTML and CSS and see the results. So that's the one you want to sign up for. Do make sure that you log into the email that you use, sign up with your student email using this option here, and then verify that email, because if you don't verify it, then it limits some viewing options for me when you submit the URL, and I'll show you more about that. But it allows me to see your pins or your web pages in the way that I need to grade them. So once you've walked through that process and you've signed in, you'll be taken to a dashboard that looks like this. And as I mentioned before, there's some different options here, but just click around to begin with to kind of get familiar. I have several pins on here or pages that I've used. You'll see under your work area, once you start creating pins, this is where you can find them. You can also hover over here on the right and it shows your profile. It allows you to create new pins or projects from here. Again, new pins is the one we're going to focus on, but it also has some cool things that you can see what other people are doing. If you see what's trending, you can also search for pins. So a lot of people use this to show their examples or to share their examples, and there's some really cool stuff. So if you click on any of these, it opens them up in this window that you'll soon become familiar with. But this is where you can see the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript that's required to make this action here happen. So this is the structure over here, the HTML, this is the style, and then this JavaScript's really the interactivity of what's going on. So I want you to play around with it. I want you to find some examples, but don't get too overwhelmed by all of the code if this is new to you. So the first thing that you'll do when you're ready is you will click on Pin. And I want you to notice a couple things. Before you save it, it's just really a new pin here. You'll see this in the URL. So the first thing that you want to click on is the edit button for the name of your pin. So you might call this module 3 example pin. You can name it whatever you want. If you want to kind of pick a theme for your page and make it something relevant, I don't really tell you what to name it, but you'll notice your name under the bottom, and then when you hit save, what's going to happen is up here at the top, it's going to give you a unique URL, and this is what you just need to select and copy and send to me in Canvas when you're ready to submit your assignment. So some of what you're going to be working on this week is refamiliarizing yourself with the HTML page structure, the anatomy of a page. That's one of the things that I want you to concentrate on. So really this is just a blank slate for you to start playing with. And the difference is, I'm using this example here that I've used in my previous videos. This is Visual Studio Code. This is the full web directory. This is the CSS folder with the style sheet in it. This is the HTML file. And really what CodePen does is allows you to just focus on what's displaying on the web page. So think of it as everything that you would normally put between your body element. So if I pop over to my website that I've used, I've plugged in a little bit of styles from what I've demonstrated in the other videos that focused on selectors and then also the different methods for adding CSS. But I'm going to show you really how what we've been doing in Visual Studio Code relates to how you would do it in CodePen. So if I were to take everything between the opening and closing body tag, so everything all the way down here to the footer. I don't actually need to, I could select the body element, but I don't really need to because I have a blank slate here. So I would put all of that HTML over here on the left, and you will notice that it looks a lot like my page when there's no CSS applied. It's got the structure, and since we're not going to be using JavaScript, I'm going to kind of pull that out of the way. I'm going to put this kind of in the middle here so I can see my HTML if I were to save this. But if I were to make a change here, Nikki's Bakery, let's change it to Nikki's Bakery here. You'll notice that even without saving it up here, that it's putting those changes immediately. So that's what I'm referring to as immediate changes. And so if I save that, the other thing we can do, however, once you verify your email address, is come over here and go to different views. And so I always like to pull up, depending on what I'm doing, if it's complicated or I want to have that full page view, I'll hold down my control key and click this full page view, and I can come over here and look at this just as I would in the browser normally, kind of what you would see when you're working with Visual Studio Code. I can refresh this. However, keep in mind if you're working in this window and you add in content or make any changes, you do have to save it and come over here and refresh it to see those changes in the full page view. So if we were to bring in the CSS, this is already, we don't have to link anything together, and that's another kind of benefit to using CodePen, is you don't have to do that link to the external style sheet. You don't have to worry about embedding it in your HTML or going in line. It would still work that way, but we can just come over here to our style sheet, and I can select these few styles that I've added to create the look of that page. And so I can come in here. Now keep in mind some of these comments, I can clean this up. I don't need those extra comments in here. I've got some general page styles. Whoops, I forgot my little bracket here. Keep that in mind. Pay attention, just like with Visual Studio Code, if things kind of turn a wonky color, that something's going on where you've forgotten something. But once I actually get the syntax correct, it brings in those styles. And so now the one thing is if we look at, I did not bring the body tag over. So in this case, that is one thing, which actually it does apply it to the body. So this page actually does have a body, and I didn't even have to enter that in there. You can see this background color here is what is this kind of minty green color in the background. If we refresh our page from this view, you can see that green color in the background is still being brought in here, even though, because CodePen is setting up that body element for us. And so great way to be able to play around with. If you, as you're learning these property and property values, you can come in here. If you've got a syntax wrong, you'll be able to immediately see it. If you want to see what would happen if you change the padding, the spacing, I've also added in some borders here. So if we look at this, it's a new example of a property and property value that I haven't put in yet, but this is down here for this section, for this cookie recipe. If we come over here and track down where that's at, I've applied it to the section. You can see the border down here. The property values, the width of the line that goes around is the border, the type of border that we want, which is solid, which let me change this to another example. If I changed it to dotted, you'll notice that the border immediately changed. So this is a great way for you to play around with different methods, properties, property values, without having to think about all the other things that go along when you're creating your own file structure. On here, you'll notice that I've used a couple of different examples for color, and your book goes a little bit into that. And this line here for the color of the text in the section, I've used just the word white. Another way to do that is the shorthand version of the hex value code. Now you'll also notice the background is set using a hex value code, and it's usually a unique six-digit number. This down here for the color white, that also happens to be FFF, is the shorthand for the 6-digit. Because all of the digits are the same, that would be 6 digits of F, 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 and F. We can shorten it to 3 when they're all the same. You can notice up here I've got it in uppercase, down here lowercase, which I should correct those and be consistent in my casing, but it will work either way. And so once you make all of your changes, once you establish the structure, and that's one thing that you can look at in this example, is kind of how I've set up this main areas on my web page as part of my web anatomy. Once you're ready and done with it, keep in mind some of the spacing here. You want to fix that. When you copy and paste in, sometimes CodePen can make it a little wonky, but from there you've saved all your changes and you're going to copy this, and that's what you're going to submit. Now keep in mind, if after you submit it you come in here and make changes, that it's going to it's going to be whatever you've saved last when I go to access it. So be careful with that. If you want to make new pins, you just go back to the, you can click over here, would be the easiest. You can do a new pin. You can also do what's called a fork down here at the bottom right. If you create a fork, it's going to copy everything that you have on this one, but give you a new unique URL. So you could keep this one to turn in for module 3, but if you wanted to make a copy and do some other practice or playing around, you could make a fork, and then wouldn't be affecting what you've turned in. So that's one method to do. But hopefully that gives you everything that you need for this week. I know there's a lot of concepts here. Week 2 and week 3, or chapters 2 and chapters 3, is really a lot of that foundational stuff that if you put in the effort to learn this material, you're going to find that it really helps you as we progress into additional topics. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.